thank you to my panelists on stage. The topic Pradnya asked us to speak about is, the CEO's perspective on talent, right? Maybe I can begin, and by the way, if you have questions, give it to anybody from the Three Fish team. They can just send it to me, and I'll make sure I include it. There's Pradnya, there are a bunch of other colleagues who can take the questions from you. So maybe to the panelists, and you all have mics. Okay, great. So just to introduce the panelists, I'm not going to talk about what they do, but just by name. Hitesh from InfoEdge. Everybody in HR knows Naukri.com. Here's the guy who started it. Pankaj, if you've been to a cinema hall and you've heard Dolby sound, Pankaj. We all love Indigo. Anil's on the board of Indigo, long-time CFO of Indigo. Right, and all of us get many calls through the day from BPOs. So one person who represents them, but an outstanding chief executive, Babu. All right, perfect. To kick us off, I was reading this survey the other day that said there are 800 companies, the survey about 800 companies, and they asked people, listen, what's the importance of talent development? It's a bit of a leading question, so obviously the response was, hey, it's 90% of the people said it's the single most important issue, right? But when they asked the question, listen, how well are you doing on this dimension? 9% people said, listen, we're doing a really good job. So only 1/10 of the people who believe this is really important believe that you're doing it well. When I speak to HR, folks around the country and to CEOs, I hear the same stuff, rotation kara do, coaching karwa do, which are all good things to do. But I'm curious, as you've looked at these in your organizations, what are differentiated things that you guys have done that you think this audience needs to hear about? Pankaj, can I start with you?
Yeah, so as we were talking earlier about this, Dolby is really a technology company, and our business is about innovation. So bringing new technologies to market, innovating the technologies. So we're about a $7 billion valuation company, but only 2,000 people. So it's a small team of highly specialized people. Very low attrition, long tenures. So how do you get people engaged? How do you keep them excited? So I think what the company's done very interestingly is they've made innovation and through events and through programs, but a part of the culture. So for example, we have this week-long innovation festival called Idea Quest, and that's where anyone from the company is encouraged to bring in a new idea with a new technology, new program, new business model, whatever. And that a lot of time has led to those ideas coming to fruition, coming to business, coming to market, but also those people moving into new roles. So, and typically what we see is people who've been in the company for 15, 20 years, but they're always doing something new every 2 or 3 years. So I think bringing innovation and providing that opportunity and making that part of the culture through HR programs or innovation program, I think has been very unique.
Pankaj, I have another question for you. I understand that Dolby has built a whole new capability, right? All of us are used to hearing about Dolby as a sound technology company, but you've built a completely new video technology capability. That must have meant bringing in different kinds of talent. How have you brought them in? How have you made sure they've been successful in your context?
Yeah, so we've worked on video technology for about almost 10 years before we brought it to market. So there was a lot of time and money spent on research. And it just hasn't been about new people, but also reskilling the existing talent in-house. So one guy in our company, as an example, who's probably had 3 Academy Awards that he's won for his work. And some of the leading work he's done in audio, but it's also the same guy now after probably 30 years in the company is doing leading work on video. So it's this mindset around solving problems, enhancing experiences. So for example, in a Dolby meeting, if you're talking about simple problems, people are yawning and getting bored. You put a complex problem on the board and just the energy in the room changes. So I think it's this culture and the encouragement people are given to just go do new things. So it's both new and the existing.
Right. Hitesh, you want to jump in and talk about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so firstly, the standard stuff also works. It's not as if that stuff doesn't work. So we do a bit of that, but it's hard to scale. So if you're running a large organization, it's hard to provide job rotation to everybody and so on. And we are a digital company. So, we need to constantly sort of upgrade our talent, upgrade our skills. Bringing new people from outside also helps from time to time, and that's something we do. But then we hit upon a couple of ideas which have worked brilliantly for us, and I'll tell you what we do. So this whole learning piece, we need to sort of, so much changing in the world we operate in. People need to acquire new skills, and it's hard to get people who can teach them these skills in the Indian market. There aren't too many people who understand what's happening out there. For example, take AI and machine learning. Very few people know what's really happening in that world. But there are lots of online courses available. So we started a program called iLearn in our company a while back, where we said, listen, we'll periodically release a list of courses which we think you should be doing, and different courses for people in sales, different courses for people in technology, product, different functions, and so on. And if you do these courses online, we will reimburse you, provided you get a certificate of completion, right? And not all these courses are not expensive. Some of these courses are free. Some cost $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. It was slow to take off the program, but now we have a few hundred people doing these courses every year. And if you're spending $5,000, $10,000 per course, and it's not expensive, and there are a huge variety of courses out there which people can do, right? So that's something which has worked really well for us. And another thing we tried, so we initially, we used to get people from outside to talk inside in the organization. So every now and then we would have a speaker from outside. And yes, we would have 100 people attend and so on. But again, that was very hard to scale because how many speakers can you get from outside? Then we said, listen, there's a whole sort of, world out there on YouTube. There are so many interesting videos from speakers you can't even imagine, and you can't even hope to get them in InfoEdge. For example, there are videos on EQ, there are videos on digital sort of marketing, there are all kinds of videos out there. So we started a series of called Brown Bag Fridays, and we said, listen, we'll get people into a room, and you choose a video. Somebody should volunteer, he should choose a video, and then we play the video, and then we'll have a discussion around the video. And this program also became a big hit, and now, this culture has sort of taken very deep roots. We have so many sales offices, branches all over the country, and we have learning groups, and we have these Brown Bag Fridays happening everywhere where people post stuff and they discuss videos, and this has also worked very, very well for us.
So, thank you for sharing. I'm curious, Babu, about your organization. Right? Fidelity is known to be on the bleeding edge of your industry. Technology and automation is changing your business, and therefore people need to get reskilled. How are you coping with that challenge, and how are you helping your employees cope?
Yeah. So, sorry, first I need to correct. We don't identify with BPO. We are the largest asset manager in the world. We manage about $6 trillion worth of investment. So we are an investment manager, not a BPO. But having said that, I think FS, if you look globally, is really a tech industry now. Everything is technology driven in the financial services industry. So we are affected by the same cycles as, let's say, Hitesh has to deal with, that our cycles, our product proposition, everything changes 6-7 months down the line. So our learning has been probably a couple of things. One is reduce the anxiety about this for talent in general, that, my job's going away, I'll be irrelevant, all of those kinds of things. And instead what we did is we converted into a bit of a cultural ambition. For instance, to say we have kind of, if you do better than yesterday, every day you need to do better than today or yesterday. But at the same time, if you're only building a better Walkman, at some point, an iTunes is going to come and kill you, right? So you need to be conscious of how you do better today, and at the same time think about what's new in your space, in your domain. So we have a largely millennial population, so we very craftily framed it as you need to elevate everything you do today and create new capabilities for tomorrow, or simplistically #elevate, #create for the audience. But the moment you lay out a cultural ambition like that, it's that everybody is going through the chain, the anxiety levels reduce, and we also made it simpler for people to say, don't try to think of something which is very, very out there. Just think of what's adjacent to you. If your competence is somebody who's doing something in investment management, just you're a dealer, then think about what's happening just next to you, in your domain, so that it's not so unnerving. Just reduce the anxiety levels. But also establish that for your own benefit, if you're not elevating and creating, you're not doing yourself a favor. Forget company, industry, revenue, product, disruption, and so on and so forth. but just for your own benefit, just think what you're elevating today and what you're creating for yourself today. Then it's easy to aggregate, right? Then if everybody is thinking like that, the teams, functions, company, everything sort of starts to think like that.
Super, thank you. And it sounds like you've done this at scale because you have a large number of young people in your organization, right? Not too different from Indigo, for example, right? And I mean, one of the things that we've all heard about Indigo is low cost, on time, hassle-free, right? And that's, when you're doing that at scale like you guys have, it moves away from being a talent development agenda to being a culture agenda. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'll talk specifically about the people who really matter in Indigo, and they are the people who check you in and people who fly with you on the aircraft, the cabin crew. So we have an institute called iFly, which is a standard induction program. But the people we recruit are very, very young. They are 18 to 20. Some of them are just school pass. And so, they are not in that qualification criteria, but they are skilled in the school. So at one level, we go through the standard learning induction program as per the regulator, as per the company requirement. So that's at one level. But what also we do simultaneously is that we call a whole lot of leaders within the Interglobe group to come and talk to these young children. They're literally children and they are kind of, absolutely motivated by what they hear. But also we have tied up with most of the international universities. So for example, individually I am a sponsor for National University of Singapore. So I work with them. They come every year. So their leadership programs that they do, they have to take them to certain organizations, watch what is happening, what is different. So they come down to iFly, and I kind of work specifically, I'll talk of NUS. So they are this leadership team, they are top MDs, entrepreneurs, doctors, pilots, the senior guys who are going for their final management skill. And they come and interact with these children and see the processes that we have in the iFly. Now what that actually does for the team, that while here is a young lady who's wanting to become a cabin crew, she's aspiring now to become a pilot because she's hearing a story of a crew who has become a pilot. And we have a large percentage of crew and check-in staff who go on to become pilots. Now that's aspirational. That is really what they do. And how you bring the culture of always encouraging them to add value. So most of the great ideas that Indigo and it's tom-tommed in the media actually come from the children. So for example, just not to take too much of the time, so an aircraft typically comes with the serving trolleys, and they're all, if you sit in the aircraft, you'll see in the front of the aircraft and at the back of the aircraft, there are these little bit, these trolleys parked inside the plane. Now one of the crew member comes and tells, now this is how the culture is driven. It's always how do you get better. And now we don't serve food on the aircraft, but these aircrafts are typically made for food because you have to serve 180 passengers. So the crew member said, why do we have so many of these inside? We just take them off. And what is critical in the aviation industry is the weight that we carry on the plane, because every gram of weight that we carry is fuel burn. Fuel burn means cost. So every single person in Indigo is only looking at one aspect. How do I take the weight of the plane? So everything that we do, and at times I know you're all flying Indigo and it's a big complaint because they are so miserly when it comes to supporting. But all I can say is that because of these efforts, they make it so much more efficient and more profitable. So that culture is imbibed. And I was just telling my colleagues, as a mindset that has come about in the organization. I was going in the bus with a senior colleague of mine, and as we were entering the plane, he said, did you notice the stitches of the bus? The bus that takes you to the plane? I had not noticed. I said, no, I have not noticed. He opened the phone, showed me like a typical stitch had come off from the cladding on the bus. I didn't notice, I didn't pay attention. When we got down, The colleague of mine opened the machine and showed it to me, and he said, see, it's stitched up. Now, to me, that's amazing. That means, we are not living in a world of ego. We are looking at a solution. Somebody points out, the other guy gets on with it. And we just get on without, looking into the protocol as to who you are, why are you bringing it to my notice, go to my, right channels, like we all are sucked into in our daily lives. So I think that culture that has come led right from the top. You have to see sometimes when our boss travels, he will take the tissue and start cleaning the glasses, just embarrassing everybody in the aircraft. So that is what is critical. And we do it all the time, and we do it consistently. In fact, there was a flooding in Mumbai last year, I'm not too sure, 2 years back. And we had no flight cancellation because the crew themselves were doing everything. They were pulling the bags, the pilots were pulling it, putting it in the aircraft. So to me, it's a lot of cultural
So this
stuff.
culture thing, Anil, it sounds like from the two examples you gave about the cladding and cleaning the glasses, that it's also role modeling from the top, right? Each of you, when you travel, like you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
when you leave the aircraft, you
Yeah.
put your seat belts, so
Absolutely.
it saves time for the next flight.
Absolutely. Again, the other typical, the most important piece of flying is how quickly you turn around the plane. Planes are meant to be in the air, not on the ground. Now, our average turn time is 20 minutes. Now, how do you make it 19? Everybody's working. So when we get off the plane, so when you we carry on the plane, because every gram of weight that we carry is fuel burn. Fuel burn means cost. So every single person in Indigo is only looking at one aspect. How do I take the weight of the plane? So everything that we do, and at times I know you're all flying Indigo, and it's a, it's a big complaint because they are so miserly when it comes to, supporting. But all I can say is that because of these efforts, they make it so much more efficient and more profitable. So that culture is imbibed. And I was just telling my colleagues, as a mindset that has come about in the organization. I was going in the bus with a senior colleague of mine, and as we were entering the plane, he said, did you notice the stitches of the bus? The bus that takes you to the plane? I had not noticed. I said, no, I have not noticed. He opened the phone, showed me like a typical stitch had come off from the, the cladding on the bus. I didn't notice, I didn't pay attention. When we got down, the colleague of mine opened the machine and showed it to me, and he said, see, it's stitched up. Now, to me, that's amazing. That means, we are not living in a world of ego. We are looking at a solution. Somebody points out, the other guy gets on with it. And we just get on without, looking into the protocol as to who you are, why are you bringing it to my notice, go to my, right channels, like we all are sucked into in our daily lives. So I think that culture that has come led right from the top. You have to see sometimes when our boss travels, he will take the tissue and start cleaning the glasses, just embarrassing everybody in the aircraft. So that is what is critical. And we do it all the time, and we do it consistently. In fact, there was a flooding in Mumbai last year, I'm not too sure, 2 years back. And we had no flight cancellation because the crew themselves were doing everything. They were pulling the bags, the pilots were pulling it, putting it in the aircraft. So to me, it's a lot of cultural
So this
stuff.
culture thing, Anil, it sounds like from the two examples you gave about the cladding and cleaning the glasses, that it's also role modeling from the top, right? Each of you, when you travel, like you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
when you leave the aircraft, you
Yeah.
put your seat belts, so it
Absolutely.
saves time for the next flight.
Absolutely. Again, the other typical, the most important piece of flying is how quickly you turn around the plane. Planes are meant to be in the air, not on the ground. Now, our average turn time is 20 minutes. Now, how do you make it 19? Everybody's working. So when we get off the plane, so when you enter an Indigo plane, you'll find the seat belts folded. Every seat belt will be folded. Now, who folds them? The crew themselves. So, there are 4 crew, and there are 180 seats, so 45 each. They just put the, just fold the seat belts, because when we get off, all of us just throw the seat belts on one side and get off. Now, when any one of us travels, we ensure that, at least 6 to 8 seats we all do ourselves. So I take that much time off my colleague.
Right.
It is just that inbuilt. And even sometimes they will see my white hair and say, you move on. And I say, no, I must do my 6 seats on it. And I just put them in a fold and get off the plane. Nobody notices, nobody cares, but I notice and I care, and my company benefits from it.
Thank you. I think all of us will remember to do that when we fly next. Thank you for sharing that.
If I could just add an example
Sure.
of what I think setting the tone from the top. Again, ours is an innovation company about, building the next big thing. And our CEO always tells this very famous thing. I mean, he goes about telling everybody, it's not about me. He said, don't expect me to come up with the ideas. So, and I think that's the culture, because I think people who innovate, it's not about me. It's like, I don't need to get it. It's about this collaboration that goes on. So I think setting the tone from the top is very, very essential.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's shift gears to another topic. At lunch, I was talking to a few members of the audience, and one question was, everybody says that the people agenda is the most important agenda. And yet, there are many people who work in HR who feel that HR doesn't have a seat at the table, right? This is a problem that's evident, and yet it exists, right? Would just love your thoughts on how in your organizations you've grappled with this, how you've made that partnership more effective, and what your ask from your colleagues in HR are. Hitesh, you want to go? Yep.
So I don't think that's true, that HR doesn't have a seat at the table, at least not in Info Edge. See, companies like ours are all about people. People are the raw material as far as we're concerned. Everything is built by people. If you don't have great people, you don't have a company. It's all about intellectual property. Dolby is the same, right? So the people function is the most important function. It's all about attracting, retaining, developing these people, and then creating a culture where they can give their 110%. So that you have innovation. You're doing new things all the time. You're always ahead of competition. So therefore, the most important function in the company, in a way, is HR. Right. Now the question then becomes, do you have the right HR sort of team? Do you have HR people who understand business? Do you have HR people who understand that their job is not to just work in a silo as an HR function or a department, but they are really the company. So their job is to work closely with businesses, partner with them, understand the lay of the land, understand what's happening outside, because things change so rapidly in our company. So if they are able to develop this competence, they are in business meetings able to create a lot of value. And ultimately, people start valuing people who create value, right? So if a business partner sees an HR partner or an HR Spock creating a lot of value for him, I mean, he will work sort of very, very close. He or she will work very closely with them.
So Hitesh, tell us, and Babu,
Yeah.
I'd love to get you into this as well. This word, business partnering, right? We hear it a lot. Give us a few examples of how people that you've worked with have done that very, very effectively and have earned your trust and grown.
Yeah. See, I think this is my personal view that the days of generalists in any function, I think the value you get out of that conversation is very limited, I think. And that applies to HR partners as well. I think if HR partners don't, Hitesh was hinting that, is if you just come in with a very, very theoretical, very, very tertiary subject around, performance rating and process and so on and so forth, as opposed to engaging with conversations about what's the right org design to deliver a particular business strategy. That's a very valuable conversation. Then it is no longer about us giving a seat on the table for an HR partner. They've earned the right to be there in that conversation on their own merit. So I think where we have benefited from is when our HR colleagues bring in that kind of technical expertise, HR technical, people technical expertise into the conversation. It can be formed by any number of things, outside in view, just because you're a subject matter expert in it, and so on and so forth. But I think that is key. I think bringing that is key. One area where I feel is underrepresented in typical management team conversations, which immediately wakes up the rest of the business leaders in it, is org design. I think a reasonably underrepresented conversation. And not org design just purely in terms of structure. If you think of HR business partners as the custodians of the culture of whatever function, team, company, whatever they're representing, you cannot build a culture at scale without the right structure behind it. So, then the importance of org design as a topic just goes up massively, right? So you've got a fantastic role to play. You as HR business partners have a fantastic role, a domain that you can bring into the management conversation to play. So I think if you just start to exhibit that, come at it from that standpoint, not just a process standpoint saying, have you done our appraisals today or whatever number of things, just changing the tone of that conversation I think helps.
Yeah, I think, and building on that, I think involving HR, I mean, cliched thing, but it's going from administration and process to, to strategic value, strategic planning. And, first of all, we have to give HR a seat at the table. It's not, they don't always have it. And I think what I find personally, and my HR business partner is right here, so where I get a lot of value from that is objectivity. I think when we, in the kind of business we are in, whether it's people or it's business decisions or, whatever we're doing, there's a lot of passion involved and there's bias involved. And I think HR, what I find the best value I get is just bringing objectivity into that conversation, into the perspective. So I think, and they need to be given the permission to do that. So obviously it's, some just get it naturally and some have to be given, but I think getting them that permission and involving this, allowing them to, provide objectivity, I think is very crucial in that business partnering role.
Anil, one of the things you were saying earlier is in founder-led businesses, and I'd love to come back to you on that, Hitesh, as well. The role of fit is really important, and you were describing how HR at Interglobe has played a good role in helping you guys make sure you integrate people with the right culture. Tell us about that culture challenge to begin with and how HR has supported you.
Yeah, so my former colleague and a dear friend is sitting here. He's one of the architects of the whole Indigo story, Sonu Soni. So, it's a two-way journey. There are people who will be proactive, who will be outwardly, and they have to come and knock the doors. So they will get an opportunity to play the bigger role. Likewise, the company also has to, the organization also has to induct the people who really matter. So I think sometimes it's shortcoming on one side, sometimes on the other. I think if both, work together, and for example, in Interglobe, the executive committee of Interglobe, which overlooks all the businesses, has very active participation of HR people. We do not take any action unless it's signed off by the HR. So that's so much about the participation. But it's also on the other side, how active you are. So if both sides work together, then it works very well at one level, that is as far as the involvement is there. And I think, like every function, HR, if you're talking particularly, is also about leadership. And whether you're siloed in your HR role or going beyond. And if you are participating in the business, take part in the business, understand what's the business challenges, and the larger ecosystem, you will behave differently, and that is what makes the difference. Last year I was at a talk show, and there was a talk show between Mr. Deostali. There were some people from L&T earlier in the panel, so he was the big boss of L&T, and Mr. Mahalingam, who was the CFO of TCS. And both of them at the talk show were sitting, and it was an offsite, and some family members were there, and both of them came up from HR role. And they both went on to lead the thing, and obviously the talk at that time from the spouses was being, when would you enter HR so that you can also reach someplace in life? So, of course I had to tell my wife that I'm too old now, so you have lost that opportunity. But all the good HR people go on to become leaders, and I truly believe that today's world is dominated by HR people. And those HR people who are proactive and participating in the business, and building that, working closely with the teams as a team player, I think are the ones who are going to really go all the way.
So I heard externally oriented from Hitesh. I heard objectivity from you, Pankaj. Proactive, Anil, was your big point. And, adding value, particularly on strategic topics like structure, right? So thank you guys for sharing that. We're going to move to one other segment and then throw it to the audience. Earlier when we were speaking, every single one of you spoke about talent scarcity, right? And how it's, you guys are all growing your organizations faster than earlier. There's a lot of change happening, and scarcity of talent is a big challenge, right? you can't afford to make mistakes when you bring people in. I'd love to just go quickly around and hear from each of you, what have you done to increase your batting average on new hire integration and making sure that people are successful? So how do you identify better, and how do you make sure they succeed when they join you? Yep.
So how do you, so I'll start at the top because, you have to get the right people at the top
Right.
first, and then everything else follows. So first and foremost, I think what we've realized over time is that you have to do ref checks.
Ref checks.
Super, super important. And you have to do ref checks with people you know, and people who will not lie to you, right? Because, what I've realized over time, and I've sometimes gone against the ref checks I got, is that they're always correct. So people, but they will only tell you the truth if they know you,
Yeah.
right? So you have to work very hard to figure out who is it, who you know, who will not lie to you, and do a ref check with that person. I think that's very critical. Of course, we have our own processes, multiple people interview the candidate and so on and so forth. But there's only that much that you can get in half an hour or 1 hour of meeting a candidate. So network, your ref check, your network. So if you know somebody, then you already have a ref check on that person because you know that person. These things matter a lot. So if people refer people to you because you know them, that works brilliantly, right? And if you're hiring cold, do your homework. A mistake can put you back by at least a year or two, if not more. Sometimes even 3 years, because it takes a year for you to realize that you made a mistake, and then it takes a year to do something about that mistake after that. And in our kind of businesses, we don't have time, because in the internet space, especially in the new business that we're trying to build, if you lose a year or two, somebody else takes over the market. So you don't have the liberty to go wrong. So you have to be you would rather not have anybody than have the wrong person, right? How do you onboard the person? How do you sort of, the way it works is very simple. I mean, once you've got the right person in, and you see people join you because, at least our kind of companies, because they want to challenge, they want to make a difference, they want to make an impact, they want to achieve something. So you have to empower. You sort of don't want to get into the way. At the same time, you want to oversee what they're doing for a while at least, till you develop confidence in their ability. Because like I said, you can't afford to go wrong. You have very little room to go wrong. You lose 6 months, it's over. So it's a delicate balance which has to be maintained. You get the person in, you give him a lot of freedom, you give him a lot of flexibility, you work with him for a while, and sometimes there's a lot of resistance when new people come in from outside. You sort of manage that. You help him navigate the organization. You set him up for success. So, if there are reasons why that person is likely to fail, you try and eliminate those reasons, and before you get the person in, right? So it's a balancing act, and like I said, you can't get in the way also, but at the same time, you don't want things to go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hitesh. For the other panelists, I'd love to hear a story about an example of how you really probe for culture fit, right? Because in many organizations, that's what really breaks. So tell us a story about how you did that very, very effectively.
See, I don't know if it's a story. I can share case study-based interview process for senior people. We give them a real problem that we have, and then they pitch the solution, whatever they come up with, to us in that case study. You can really find the good and bad hot buttons of individuals in that format. They gave about 90 minutes to prep and 90 minutes to present. So we'll intentionally push the individual, saying, thought this through, so on and so forth. Then their habits, their emotional stability, all of that just comes out, right? So initially, we only did it for a small set. We didn't do it for everybody. The success rate, the fitment rate of individuals that went through case studies, much remarkably higher than people that didn't. So now we've made it across all senior positions that they have to have case studies. But for a technical audience here, I'll just say one more and stop, but the same logic is that even for junior levels, selecting based on interviews and I'm going to make a plug for a platform here, so there are other choices. It's just a platform we use, so you don't have to pick that platform, just putting a disclaimer there. Is the same logic applies to developers or technical people. There's a platform called HackerRank,
Yep.
where you can see how they are coding. It shows you the mindset and the mentality of, are they taking shortcuts? Or are they looking really for the perfection and the excellence? Are they designing for today, or they're designing for the next person that's going to inherit that piece of code? So it shows you the personality of the individual. So again, very, very similar, what quartile of performance people that are hired through HackerRank or something like that, where they fit in the performance quartile versus people that have not been hired, there's a very, very real difference. So I think putting them right at the process of selection in a much more real life situation, interviews are not real. Interview is a sales pitch. You will never get the real out of it. So I think putting them more in a real life situation and seeing how they respond and behave, I think is a good starting step.
And do you find that senior people interviewing for these jobs push back on doing case studies?
Yeah, and we say no. There are some people that
That's
are
good
hesitant.
data as well, right?
Sorry?
That's good data as well.
That's good data as well, absolutely, yeah.
Terrific. So, Pankaj or Anil, any comment, and we'll throw it to the audience?
Yeah, so I'll give an example of something that we're going through right now. So this is not just about new hiring, but in our business and my organization deals a lot with our partners and customers. So, and we talk about technology disrupting businesses, but I think technology disrupts technology businesses even much more. So what's happening in our businesses? So, traditionally we've dealt, for example, let's say with a broadcaster. And the technology decision in a broadcaster were always in the technology function. So the CTO in his organization was making technology decisions. But that business is changing. For example, someone like Netflix coming in. The technology decision is not just in the CTO function anymore, it's wide. And we see that being replicated across our entire customer base. So when we are now talking to a operator, a broadcaster, not just the CEO, the content person, the marketing person, the business person, everybody is now suddenly involved in a technology decision. And what that means for us is, the organization that I have is equipped to go and have technical conversations. So there's a gap certainly that we have in this space. And how do we bridge this gap? Because now we need to just not have a technology conversation, but also need to have a marketing, a content, and many other conversations which we don't really know how to do. So that's something I'm going through right now. I think a couple of approaches. This is not done. This is not solved as yet. So in the middle of it. But I think, my HR business partner is an integral part of that, how we're going to solve this. We're bringing in an external consultant who's actually from the industry, who's had long experience in sports broadcasting. He's from the customer side, so we're bringing him in, who's going to work for us pastime, give us that, help us build that ability, mentor the team. But at the end of it, we also know that there's potentially, going to be some fit issues between some of the employees, so we may have to change the organization at all, also. So I think it's recognizing, working through, and I would rather, fail fast than, take a lot of time to figure this out.
Thank you, Pankaj. We have about 15 minutes. Should we take some questions from the audience? Yeah? Any questions for our panel here? Yes, Rahul?
So Anil, this question is to you. This whole culture change is something that each one of us keeps battling with. We don't know how to put our arms around it. Every CEO keeps telling the HR head that ownership badhao company ke andar. There needs to be more ownership. We keep struggling with that. One key theme that you've given is that the leader has to lead by example. So 2 questions to you. First is, if there is one more that needs to be done, what is that? And second is, if there is one more thing apart from leaders leading by example, what is that one thing which will give the highest leverage in the way you start changing the behavior of people? And the second one is, if within the leadership team, you don't see many people living the culture, how do you actually bring that into the leadership team?
Thanks. So I'll take the second one first. That's the easier one. So, it really is viral. It is just no boundaries in our organization. So each one, in a way, in a positive way, competes with everybody and there are no boundaries. So there's no function limits. There are no limits to a function growth, to an individual's growth. You have heard about Aditya Ghosh. He was a 32-year-old lawyer, went across, went to head an airline. And many of us, I mean, I've been a group CFO all my life. Now I run a business within the group. So that is just how you will lead your life beyond your job or beyond your KRA, scoping, whatever you call it. You HR people have very good terms which I am not aware of. But all of these things you do, and that is what at one level you make the difference. The second and equally importantly is this is the new world. And the new people want to do everything in the shortest time. So you let the floor open to them, let them lead themselves. We always put constraints and checks, and there have to be processes. I'm not saying there are no processes, but let them fly in a way, and you'll see magic. I see a whole lot of stuff going on in our company. Age is just no barrier. People are going from finance to cargo to something, and they're doing exceedingly great job. That means they're aspirational, they're doing it. So that, to my mind, is something that organizations can help build that culture. Now, this is a cultural thing. Otherwise, in traditional organizations like ours, I mean, it's hard to imagine that you go and say, I want to do something completely different business, different area of work, whatever. It's a mindset which has to be coming from the top, because if you don't support it, it will not happen. So, it's something at the top. And one more time, the first one, sorry, you asked me.
Beyond role modeling, what is the other most important action you need to do to set the culture?
Clearly, on that side, you have to make it a mass movement. That mass movement has not to be like a display of what you're doing, but whatever you're doing has to be across the board. It has to be in numbers. It cannot be one-off, because you are yourself a role model. You are setting the trend. You're doing everything that you are. But if you do not populate the organization with such examples, it will not pick up. People will not believe in that story. People will only believe in that story if you do it across the board and consistently. You will have failures. You will have a whole lot of setbacks. But that is how you have to, as a leader, you have to set that thing. You yourself are one, but how do you make it across, like empowering, trusting, humility, and all of those things I don't need to go into, but how you make it, you almost enforce on people. And that is the benchmark for them to go to the next level. It's already laid down, a lot of it in writing, a lot of it not in writing, but that culturally you are getting there. You're making the difference. Whole lot of examples in our organization and so many others that we see beyond our organization is how do you
in fact,
build
on that
it.
point, let me bring in another organization. So Babu, your organization, global organization, global standards, technology, and young people. Beyond role modeling, what do you do to make sure the culture is consistent?
Yeah, I'd probably slight flip of it. As much as it is important to do role modeling for positive behavior reinforcement, it is also important to set boundaries about negative behavior reduction as well, right? So dealing with behaviors that are not adding to your culture and vision fairly decisively and publicly, I think is very key. Because you need to draw the guiding rails, so to speak, and slowly, hopefully, if you've got a right culture, that's a fairly limited band, but you kind of squeeze it to the right level.
Thank you.
If I could just build on that, I think defining values, I think, is very, very critical from an organization perspective. And it's not just, some text we put up, but really understanding what is the kind of value you want to have in your company. For example, at Dolby, one of the key values we have is leading generously. So, we're an industry, industry leading brand, we lead innovation in the industry. And I see this value play out across the organization very consistently. So it's not just about, I'm doing this and what do I get in return? It's about, how can I take this industry forward? How can I take my customers forward? So I think being clear with your values and communicating that, I think, is also very, very essential, because I've seen that a lot of time that is missing, that clarity of value is missing.
Thank you. Let's take another question. Yes, Anita with the bell. Thank you for not ringing it so far.
So my question is to all the panel members. What is the one thing that you would advise HR to stop doing? And you did share your thoughts around what HR should do in terms of getting seat on the table. But if you have to really pinpoint, so what is that one thing that HR should start doing? Thanks.
One thing that Isha, maybe we can just go around, get a one-sentence response, and then we can probe into anything. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Hitesh, can we start with you? Stop doing.
Shall I go first? To give you stop being defensive. You should not ask to earn the right. You should not say, why am I needed? Stop being defensive.
Thank you, Babu.
You know, fundamentally, see, HR is like any other function. There's no difference between HR and sales and marketing, you know. So marketing guys, sometimes they also operate in a silo. Sometimes sales guys operate in a silo. So as long as people get the context, and everything, you know, should be approached from first principles. It should not be, listen, this is what I did in my previous company, therefore this is what I want to do here. This is what works in HUL, therefore this is what I will do here. You have to understand the context of the company in which you're operating. And if you understand the context, you'll come up with the right solutions. So this whole business of, you know, this is what used to happen in this company, therefore we should do this here, that does not work, in my view. And it does not, it's not just relevant for HR, this advice is for everybody, for all functions.
So horses for courses,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And don't be defensive. Thank you, Pankaj.
So again, this is, you know, and this is a change that we made at Dolby, and I've seen the benefit very multifold, is moving away from performance evaluation and ratings to positive reinforcement. So our whole performance management philosophy changed a few years, you know, in terms of, you know, a 3 or a 4 and all of that rating, to really about development, growth, and positive reinforcement. And there was a lot of concern in the company that, you know, so how do you provide feedback and all of that? But I think the benefit of this has completely, you know, overshadowed any of the, maybe there's some negatives also in this, but I think that mindset moving, and it's about people, right? I mean, as we talked about, people are very important. So get away from numbers and ratings and really about the people and, you know, pushing them forward and reinforcing and developing the growth mindset.
Terrific. Anil?
Yeah, so one, be great in your function, but be part of the organization. Think organization, be part of it. Do not think yourself to be different from there. And one thing that HR should not do is they should have empathy. And I know it's going to sound radical because that's what HR people are supposed to be good at. My experience with HR has been that, you know, many times they will say, you know, I love you, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I have this process. And I think that they should not do. If you want to be different leader, look beyond the lines, take up the matter, make a case for your people, and you will see the magic. But, you know, we are always, the last line I love from the HR people. After 5 very emotional lines comes the last line, but, and then it stops. So to me, that is the differentiator. And I look at many people all the time, and I've seen many people over my lifetime that, you know, and I see what difference they make. And when they go beyond that line, they become different leaders years later.
Yeah, I think, thank you. So it strikes me that, you know, between everything that you're saying, a common theme almost is courage, right? Don't put yourself in a box and don't be afraid to get out there and make a point that you have. Don't be defensive, right? So thank you, and thank you, Anita, for that question. We probably have time for maybe 2 more. Yeah, please. There's a mic right there.
So of course, case-based interviews have been heard about. I mean, I've myself been a part of one when I was selected. But what about behavioral event interviews? How effective do you all feel in the context of, like, as against a case-based interview? We do a lot of BEIs. Aren't they effective enough is what I heard from you then?
So we're actually starting with Hogan. In the theme of this conference, we are trying to see if we can do Hogan for all very senior leader hires. But I don't have enough data to say it's either way or this way or that way. But so far, nobody's saying it's not helping. But we are fairly early in the cycle.
Yeah. One of the things that I can probably add to, given what we do as an organization is recruit senior leaders, I think it's an and, right? The BI is really important as well, and so is Hogan, and so is the case thing. Of course, you can't do all of them and overdo it, but I think the best organizations, depending on the role you're hiring for, there are roles which are highly functionally oriented, and the case study approach really helps. There are other roles which are really managing other people, and therefore another kind of intervention helps. So depending on the role, what you pick might change. All right, let's get one last question from the audience. Pradnya, you always have great questions. What would you like to know from the panel?
I curbed my enthusiasm after that. Okay. So I heard courage, I heard conviction. What about passion? Do you need that in your HR folks? And passion for what?
Thank you, Pradnya.
Passion for your business, to Anil's point earlier as well, right? So you don't want to think HR. You should have passion for why the company exists, what you're trying to solve for your customers. If it's passion for my HR process and so on, then you lost the plot, I think.
Hitesh?
Yeah, passion for growing the business, passion for working with the CEO to sort of do new things, but not passion towards a process or towards something which has worked somewhere else. Like I said, you have to think from first principles. A lot of it is common sense. Many of these things work when there is a line of people outside waiting to join your company, right? Then you have all the time in the world to do all the interviews. You can get them for discussions, etc. But if there's no talent, if people are hard to get, there are positions we've been trying to close for a year. We haven't got people. We are unable to find the right person, right? Then what do you do? See, that's the crux, right? Then do you compromise on some of your values? Do you ignore a bad ref check? What do you do then? So in a market which is fast moving, where there's a scarcity of talent, you have to think differently. Some of these approaches may not work. So, and that is something which has to be understood by everyone.
So I think, what you said last time and also this time, Hitesh, it sounds like a really, really important factor in your business, and I heard that echoed across, was, make sure you look at the problem and decide what's the best solution for this problem in our context, and not try and copy paste or cut copy paste, as we say.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, one last word, our time's up. Anybody from the panel would like to respond to Pradnya's question on passion?
Yeah, passion and attitude. I think these are the two things. And passion, to my mind, is decided not over your tenure, but on your last moments of your career, because that really sets the tone as to how much of passion is left. Because if you still have passion, that means you have done a great job in your life. And that it is just inbuilt. It has to come naturally. Because if you don't have the passion for a job, my strong recommendation is must look for a change, because that may be not the right place. That's about it. It may be a better job, that is in the offing for you. So passion is like critical, and the whole attitude that, how do you live, walk the talk.
Terrific. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you as an audience. Thank you for listening.